When last we left our heroes. So as the player characters slowly come to consciousness, they realize that they are all captured by the same group of Gnolls here in some prison camp out in the mountains. And they correctly guess that they're the mountains overlooking the town of Glennon. This is where the Gnolls have been coming from. And they look around and they see they are not the only prisoners. They meet each other, but they also meet several NPCs that they had met from camp. But they also meet the NPC that Phaedra, Virgil's character, was looking for with the Wild Wardens. They find that he has been captured here. There's also a reporter from the Avalanche for Bria the Spindle to interact with a little bit, and that character was so much fun to play. Very over-the-top, kind of sleazy tabloid reporter. And I basically did everything I could to try to convince Bria to murder this person without being outright evil, just as scummy as possible, to put sort of Bria's morality to the test there. You know, nobody would notice if I just pushed you off this cliff. Unfortunately, over the course of the session, I was foiled. Her morality stayed true, and Hannah Honeysuckle, I think was her name, because in my world, all halflings have alliterative names, because it's a stupid fun thing. And that was that interaction. It was a lot of fun, but there were several NPCs that I wanted them to meet that were in that same predicament as themselves, prisoners of the Gnolls. So they find out that they meet all these NPCs, they're all in the same sort of predicament together, and they have to figure out, how do we escape? Clearly we can't fight our way out. We can see where our weapons are being stored, but we don't have them. And even if we could have them, there's way too many Gnolls here, and we're only 3rd level. So they decide sort of to go about other means of escaping, and this is where they foiled me for the first time and not the last. I had sort of, because getting out of prison, I think, is a very bad opening if you just leave the players to it and say, here's the prison, figure it out. And so I usually want to make sure, if you're going to employ something like that, if I'm going to employ something like that, I want to have some options, some suggestions. And so that's one of the reasons I had those NPCs, because they could say, okay, we're formulating a plan, here it is. There was also the possibility that one of the Gnolls would intentionally or unintentionally be willing to aid in their escape. But I didn't even get to any of that, because while I had removed their their weapons, not magic items, but their spellcasting focuses and their weapons and armor, they had not taken Bria the Spindle's little hand drum, because it's just a little drum. Well, it turns out, unbeknownst to me, because I had been a long time since I DM'd for a 5th edition bard, bards can use an instrument as a magical focus, and so Bria had all of her spellcasting. She used that to charm a guard and get them to, under the cover of night, escort the players out of the camp, and then they bolted down the mountain with everybody else in tow as quickly as possible. I used a skill challenge for them to quickly and quietly make their way down the mountain to avoid the detection of the Gnolls. They traveled back, were ambushed by some wolves, and that was mostly just can you fend off this large number of very weak creatures while protecting the NPCs. And so they managed to do so, keep everyone alive, get back to town, and sort of were able to download and report to town, this is what's going on. And there at town, they had kind of a big download and discussion of information. They got all the major leaders of the town together. They tried to figure out, okay, what do we do here? They got with Marshall Karn and the sawmill lady, who, I don't know if I mentioned this in the first episode, but one of the things that is sort of propping this town up is this sawmill. That is sort of the only thing keeping this frontier town economically alive. Well, as it turns out, the lady who is running it, sort of sent here from corporate, is trying to have sort of a massive power struggle between herself and the leaders of the town to throw around her weight and influence over theirs. basically doing everything possible to keep the sawmill up and running, and like, listen, I don't care if people are dying to the Gnolls, we gotta keep making wood, right? And so there was a little bit of conflict between her and the mayor, who is a spineless weakling, the old cowboy veteran, Marshal Karn, the player characters, and there was some sort of a suggestion to, let's get all of the townsfolk out of town. Let's everybody who's not able to fight, let's get them out, so that if something does happen, not more innocent people are dying, and everybody else who is willing and able to wield a weapon, let's get them ready to defend this town, because there's a bunch of Gnolls up there, and I think they're going to come attack this town, so let's defend and barricade and get everyone ready to go as much as we can. And this probably is going to be a pretty short session, because that's basically where we left things, is they'd had sort of a meeting with the leaders of the town, but they got to do lots of very characterful role-playing, and one thing that's very cool about this group is that they all enjoy spending time in their characters and getting to know each other. Obviously, you know, it takes a little bit of time. You know, in this first session together, it wasn't immediate, but they're trying and they're getting a feel for it. It was one thing that I told them was, if this campaign is going to go the distance for what we're wanting it to be, I need you to make uninteresting moments interesting, because in the past I would have just sort of skipped their whole travel back to town, maybe had the one fight with the wolves, and other than that just fast forward back to town to get to the action. But we spent, gosh, maybe 45 minutes just with them role playing, not fighting the wolves, but like before or after the wolf encounter and after the skill challenge, just talking to each other, just talking to Hannah Huckleberry. Actually, I looked through my notes and that was her name, Hannah Huckleberry. Looking through it, talking to these NPCs, interacting with them, asking questions about various things, talking to each other about their backstories, getting to know each other, little role-play interactions. There was a ton of that between these characters, and it was very cool starting to see them get into their character's skin. I like to start with combat in most of my games, or you know, an initiative-based interaction, like escaping from prison, because it gets, I mean, they've been looking at their character sheets for who knows how long, that uses all the stuff on there, but immediately afterwards, I like to have a chance for people to interact with each other, and my players did not disappoint. It's a really excellent group of role players, but also people, and I feel like that is a pretty quintessential element to a great role-playing group. So they've met with the leaders of the town, and two things happened at the end of that meeting with the leaders of the town. One, Ellie Toppin, the sawmill lady, says, hey, you can do whatever you want, but anybody who leaves the town is going to lose their job. And for a lot of these people, that's the only thing keeping them afloat. So and then she storms off. So the players sort of have her to contend with, and as they're trying to protect the people, she seems actively out for their destruction. I mean, she's not trying to hurt these people, she's trying to keep the sawmill open, but that is in direct conflict with the players' goals, and so it's interesting to see the friction being created between them. And then they're sort of congregating outside of the tavern they were meeting in to have this discussion, and an arrow strikes the ground near them with a message tied around it in incredibly crude and poorly written common that asks for them to come to the river next to town, you know, at midnight and have a bit of a conversation. And it's pretty clear to the players through context clues, especially the quality of writing and the make of the arrow, etc., that a Gnoll has shot this. And so they're trying to figure out, is this a trap? Is this a meeting? Is this a traitor among the Gnolls? Is this bait for something? Well, we don't know. And that is where we ended the first session, because every session, in my opinion, every good session ends on a cliffhanger, and so did this one. So we will find out next week, what was this meeting all about? Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.